The courtroom was silent as the judge, a stern woman with sharp glasses and a reputation for never tolerating interruptions, glanced down at her notes. The case was complicated, to say the least. Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur behind companies like Tesla and SpaceX, was facing a lawsuit that could potentially ruin him. His team of lawyers had been working tirelessly, trying to defend him against allegations that seemed too bizarre to be true. Yet, there he was, sitting in the witness stand, calm and collected as always, dressed in his signature black suit. The media was watching him closely, the cameras flashing non-stop. This was a trial that would go down in history. But then, it happened. The moment that would change everything. Musk, who had been sitting with his usual air of indifference, suddenly raised his hand in the air. The courtroom gasped, unsure of what to make of this gesture. He wasn't signaling his lawyer, nor was he making any grand announcement. Instead, he was signaling to something, or someone, in the back of the room. His hand moved in a series of jerky, odd gestures that made absolutely no sense. It looked like an elaborate sequence of hand signals, but no one knew what they meant. Not the judge, not the lawyers, and certainly not the jury. What was even more bizarre was the fact that a large black dog, lying peacefully on the floor at Musk's feet, stood up and responded to the signals. It trotted across the courtroom, its sleek body moving with purpose as it walked straight toward the judge's bench. The dog's eyes, dark and intense, never left Musk. The judge, her face a picture of incredulity, raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Musk," she said, her voice strained but firm, "explain yourself immediately." Musk didn't seem fazed. In fact, he barely acknowledged her. His gaze remained fixed on the dog as it trotted confidently to the center of the room. The jury shifted uncomfortably in their seats, the tension palpable. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. People were whispering, exchanging confused glances. Was this some sort of trick? Or had Musk truly lost his mind? As the dog approached the bench, the judge's gaze flicked from the animal to Musk, her eyes narrowing with suspicion. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded. Elon Musk leaned forward slightly, his eyes glinting with an odd mixture of seriousness and amusement. "It's simple," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm signaling my dog." There was a moment of stunned silence in the courtroom. The judge looked at him, her face unreadable. "Your dog?" she asked, clearly trying to maintain composure. Musk nodded slowly. "Yes, my dog. You see, I believe he can understand things that no one else can. He's not just a pet, he's a key player in this case." He paused, as if weighing how much more he should say. "He's been trained to detect truths and lies." The judge blinked in disbelief. "Detect truths and lies? Are you telling me you are using your dog as evidence in a court of law?" Musk nodded again, his face devoid of the usual eccentricity. This was a man who had made the impossible seem normal, but today, he had taken it to a whole new level. The courtroom fell into complete chaos. The reporters, who had been sitting at the back of the room, began to murmur amongst themselves. Whispers traveled quickly. "Is he insane? Is he really trying to use his dog as a witness? What is going on?" Even Musk's defense attorney, a seasoned lawyer known for his calm demeanor, was visibly thrown off. He leaned in to whisper something to Musk, but Musk waved him off. His focus remained entirely on the dog, who was now standing directly in front of the judge, its eyes locked on her. The judge, after a long pause, finally spoke, her voice firm and unwavering. "Mr. Musk, I am not going to entertain these theatrics. If you want to continue this trial, I suggest you explain yourself rationally." Musk's eyes flickered for a moment, and then he stood up. "I understand this is hard to believe," he said, his tone suddenly more serious, "but you'll see. Everything will make sense soon enough. My dog isn't just a pet. He's something more." The judge didn't respond immediately. She simply stared at him, her expression one of absolute disbelief. The room, meanwhile, had become electric with tension. The dog stood motionless, as if waiting for something to happen. Musk's team looked at each other, clearly uncomfortable with the turn of events. Some of them had been aware of Musk's unusual relationship with his pets, but they hadn't expected this. The dog's presence in the courtroom had been a last-minute decision, but no one had anticipated such an odd display. The judge sighed, her patience wearing thin. "Mr. Musk," she said, "I'm giving you one last chance. Either you explain this ridiculous behavior, or I will have to hold you in contempt of court." For a moment, it seemed like Musk might actually relent. But instead, he took a deep breath and turned toward the dog. The animal, sensing his cue, moved towards the center of the room, where it sat down, its eyes never leaving Musk. A silence fell over the room, and everyone watched in rapt attention. "This dog," Musk began slowly, "is more than just a companion. He has a way of sensing things that I can't explain, and he's never been wrong. He has a gift, and in this case, I believe he can help us uncover the truth." The judge opened her mouth, but Musk raised his hand to stop her. "I know this sounds insane," he said, his voice tinged with a touch of desperation. "But I'm asking for one thing. Just trust me. Trust in the possibility of the impossible. If you let him, he'll show you what I see." The dog's ears perked up, as if on cue. The courtroom waited with bated breath. Would the dog do something? Was this all part of Musk's eccentric plan? Or was it a sign of something deeper, something stranger, that no one had yet understood? Musk's eyes held the judge's gaze, a silent challenge in them. The question now was, would the court buy into his bizarre claim, or would this strange moment spiral into disaster? As the judge prepared to respond, a deep, uncomfortable silence settled in the room. What was going to happen next? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. What do you think is really going on with Musk and his dog? Is he crazy, or is there something more to this bizarre moment? Elon Musk was never an ordinary man. From the time he was a child, he had an insatiable curiosity and a mind that constantly sought out challenges. Born in Pretoria, South Africa, in 1971, he was the son of an electromechanical engineer and a nutritionist. His parents' split at an early age shaped Musk's early life, leaving him to navigate his childhood in a world that felt detached from the others around him. Musk's ability to think beyond the conventional was evident early on. He was a quiet, introverted boy, often lost in books about science, technology, and the mysteries of the universe. His obsession with science fiction inspired him to dream big, dreams that, in many ways, were too big for a boy in a small South African town. His fascination with computers began at the age of 10, when he taught himself how to program and sold his first video game, Blaster, at the age of 12. It was just the beginning. As he grew older, Musk's ambition to make a difference in the world grew exponentially. He moved to Canada to attend Queen's University and later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in both economics and physics. The transition was not smooth, but it marked a shift in Musk's trajectory toward the world's most challenging industries, tech, space exploration, and energy. His ventures began with Zip2, an online software company that helped newspapers get online, followed by X.com, which would later become PayPal. His early business experiences were a roller coaster, filled with challenges and setbacks. However, Musk never seemed to back down. After eBay bought PayPal in 2002 for $1.5 billion, Musk's financial fortune soared, and he set his sights on something even more ambitious, the future of space travel. In 2002, Musk founded SpaceX with the goal of reducing space transportation costs and ultimately making life multiplanetary. Over the years, SpaceX revolutionized space travel with reusable rockets and ambitious missions, including the first private company to send astronauts to the International Space Station. Meanwhile, Tesla, the electric car company Musk took over in 2004, disrupted the automobile industry by creating cars that didn't just look futuristic, they were practical, environmentally friendly, and driven by innovation. Musk's persona, however, was more than just that of a tech genius. He was a visionary who boldly believed in a future where humanity could colonize Mars, create sustainable energy systems, and, yes, even alter the way people thought about artificial intelligence. With each new venture, Musk continued to push the boundaries of possibility. But behind his remarkable achievements, there were personal demons and questions of mental stability that followed him wherever he went. He had been married 3 times, twice to actress Tallulah Riley, and had 5 children. His personal life was as erratic as his professional life: public breakups, erratic behavior on social media, and strange, sometimes cryptic statements. For someone who had revolutionized entire industries, Musk was equally notorious for his unpredictable behavior, much of which seemed to be driven by a sense of urgency to change the world. But in the midst of his wild career, Musk found solace in his dogs. To most people, pets are just companions, but for Musk, they were his anchors, his calm in a chaotic storm. His bond with his animals was deeper than most could understand, and his dogs became his refuge during times of extreme pressure. One dog, in particular, stood out. A sleek, black German shepherd named Orion. Musk had adopted Orion from a shelter years ago, and from the moment they met, the connection was instant. Orion became more than just a pet, he was Musk's confidant. The dog had a quiet, almost eerie presence, but Musk swore that Orion could sense things that others could not. There were times, particularly during high-stress periods in Musk's life, when he'd look into Orion's eyes and feel as if the dog knew exactly what he was going through, perhaps even more than Musk himself understood. Musk had always been an eccentric individual, but his relationship with Orion was on another level. Over the years, he had noticed patterns. Orion would often act in ways that seemed inexplicable, reacting to people or situations before they unfolded, displaying an uncanny understanding of Musk's emotional state, and even providing comfort in moments of doubt. Musk began to believe that Orion was more than just a regular dog, he had an intuition that was almost human. It was this belief that would come to play a pivotal role in the courtroom that fateful day. While most people thought of Musk as a genius inventor, he was also a man deeply burdened by the weight of his own mind. His relentless drive to make the impossible possible sometimes led him down paths of profound loneliness. The public often saw a billionaire genius, but behind closed doors, Musk was a man grappling with his own need for validation and purpose. His relationships were strained, and his need to constantly prove himself left little room for the kind of companionship most people took for granted. Orion, in those dark moments, was his constant. He never judged, never questioned Musk's grandiose ideas. Instead, he simply provided a presence, a calm that Musk desperately needed. As Musk entered the courtroom that day, he wasn't just fighting for the future of his companies. He was fighting for something much more personal, a need to prove that the unusual bond he shared with Orion wasn't madness but something real. Something powerful. Musk's belief that Orion could sense truths and lies wasn't a whimsical idea. It was something Musk had felt deep within his bones, and he was ready to defend it at all costs. The bizarre hand signal in the courtroom wasn't just a moment of eccentricity. It was Musk's way of proving that his belief in Orion's abilities wasn't just a coping mechanism or a quirk. It was a truth he was now prepared to bring into the public eye, no matter how strange it seemed. But as Musk sat in the courtroom, preparing to explain the situation to the judge and the jury, he couldn't help but wonder, would they understand? Would they see the world the way he did, or would they label him as another eccentric billionaire, chasing shadows? His mind raced. But as he glanced down at Orion, who sat calmly beside him, Musk felt a sense of reassurance. This dog, this silent, unspoken companion, was the one constant in his unpredictable life. If there was anyone who could see the truth, it was Orion. The courtroom may have been filled with skeptics, but Musk knew one thing for sure: the truth was closer than they thought. It was sitting right next to him. The courtroom was in turmoil. The judge, who had been previously composed, now looked like she was grasping for control of a situation she couldn't possibly have predicted. Musk's dog, Orion, had just walked up to the judge's bench and sat there, waiting patiently, as if the entire room had stopped making sense to him as well. There was no question that this was no ordinary trial. The prosecution team, led by the sharp and calculating Richard Gray, exchanged uneasy glances. They had prepared for a complex legal battle, but they hadn't prepared for a dog to become the star witness. Musk's own defense team, usually calm and focused, seemed completely at a loss for how to proceed. A dog being used as a source of truth in a courtroom? It defied all logic. The judge, her voice shaking slightly, finally broke the silence. "Mr. Musk," she began, trying to maintain her authority, "you are about to face serious consequences if you don't explain yourself immediately. What do you mean by using your dog as evidence in this case?" Elon Musk didn't flinch. He had anticipated some resistance, though nothing on the scale of what was happening now. "What I mean is that Orion," he paused, glancing at the dog who was sitting perfectly still, "has a way of sensing things. I'm not saying he's human, but I believe he can pick up on certain emotional cues that others might miss. He's been with me through almost everything. He knows when I'm lying, when I'm telling the truth." The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Some jurors exchanged glances, trying to process what Musk had just said. One whispered to the person next to them, "Is he serious? Is he really claiming this dog can understand truth?" The judge, clearly trying to maintain some semblance of order, banged her gavel. Silence in the courtroom. Musk, undeterred by the chaos, continued. "I know how this sounds. But before you dismiss this, I want you to keep an open mind. I didn't bring Orion here because I thought it would be a joke or a stunt. I brought him because I believe he has insight that none of us can fully comprehend." Richard Gray, the prosecutor, leaned forward. His face was a mixture of disbelief and sarcasm. "Mr. Musk," he said, his voice dripping with condescension, "are you telling us that you, the billionaire genius, are asking us to trust the judgment of a dog in a courtroom? How do you intend to prove this so-called ability? Should we all start bringing our pets to the stand?" The courtroom held its breath. Musk's eyes never left the dog, his expression unreadable. "I know this sounds crazy," he said slowly, "but let me explain. It's not just any dog. Orion has been with me through everything. He's been there in moments when my stress was off the charts, when I was making the biggest decisions of my life. And every single time, I swear, he's been able to tell whether I was on the right path or not." The tension in the room thickened. Musk's defense attorney, Claire Reynolds, leaned in to whisper something to him. But Musk wasn't listening. His focus was solely on Orion, who was sitting motionless, as if he understood the gravity of the moment. For Musk, this moment wasn't about the trial. It was about proving that his instincts, his deepest beliefs, were not as outlandish as they appeared. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Musk, I'm afraid you're asking for an impossible task. We can't allow animals to testify in this courtroom. You know that, don't you?" Musk's gaze didn't waver. "I don't believe it's impossible," he said quietly. "I believe it's just, unconventional." But that wasn't the only issue at play. The prosecution wasn't just questioning the credibility of a dog as a witness. They were digging into the heart of Musk's character, questioning his reliability and his ability to make sound decisions. Richard Gray had been preparing for this trial for months, meticulously crafting a case against Musk's business practices, his choices, and his alleged disregard for legal boundaries. And now Musk was throwing a wrench into the gears, forcing the courtroom to deal with a question no one had been prepared for: can a dog really understand the truth? "You're attempting to make a mockery of this case," Gray continued, his voice rising with anger. "You're clearly trying to confuse the jury and derail the proceedings with this stunt. And for what? To avoid responsibility?" Musk remained calm, his eyes fixed on the dog, who had not moved an inch since sitting by the bench. No, Musk replied evenly. I'm here to seek the truth. The truth about what really happened. Not just for me, but for everyone involved. I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you to consider the possibility that Orion can help us get closer to that truth. The judge, visibly exasperated, placed her hands on the bench. Mr. Musk, the court cannot entertain these distractions. I will allow you to continue, but only if you stop wasting everyone's time with these ridiculous claims. Musk nodded, his gaze still focused on Orion. He knew it wasn't going to be easy. He knew the court wouldn't just accept his unorthodox approach. But he had faith in Orion. Faith that no one else in that room seemed to understand. This dog wasn't just a pet, he was a lifeline. The room fell into a tense silence, the kind of silence that followed when something monumental was about to happen. Musk knew that this trial wasn't just about him anymore. It was about something bigger. Something that could change the way people thought about truth, intuition, and even the possibility of a connection beyond the boundaries of species. The judge sighed deeply. Mr. Musk, let's get back to the case at hand. You're here to defend yourself against allegations of fraud and manipulation. This is not about your dog. Musk straightened his posture. With all due respect, Your Honor, it is about my dog. Orion knows things that I can't explain. And I believe he's here to help us uncover what's hidden beneath all these allegations. The room was silent once again. Gray shot Musk a glare, but Musk wasn't looking at him. His focus was entirely on Orion. It was clear that something was happening, something that went beyond the simple scope of the trial. Whether anyone would ever understand it was another story entirely. The atmosphere in the courtroom was electric, almost as if the room itself had become a live wire, crackling with tension. The judge had reluctantly agreed to allow Musk's dog, Orion, to remain in the courtroom. But no one, least of all the prosecution, was ready for what happened next. This was no longer just a battle over legalities, it was evolving into something entirely different. Richard Gray, with his well-practiced poise, was growing increasingly irritated. The evidence he had gathered, the arguments he had prepared, everything seemed to be slipping through his fingers like sand. He had been confident that this trial would be a slam dunk, but Musk's bizarre claim about his dog sensing the truth had shifted the entire dynamic. And the courtroom's attention was no longer on the legal complexities of Musk's case, it was on the dog sitting at the judge's bench, patiently observing the proceedings as if he understood every word. Orion hadn't moved a muscle since he sat down beside Musk. He was calm, regal even, his dark eyes fixed on the lawyers and witnesses who nervously shuffled in their seats. It was as though the dog was taking in everything, every subtle shift in the air, every flicker of emotion. Musk, for all his brilliance, had never been able to explain exactly what it was that Orion sensed. But in moments like this, when the tension in the room reached a boiling point, Musk couldn't help but feel that the dog was the only one truly aware of what was going on. The judge, trying to regain control of the room, leaned forward. Mr. Musk, she said, her voice firm but tired. I understand that you believe your dog holds some special ability. But this court is about facts, not feelings. Do you have any evidence, anything concrete, that can help us move this case forward? Musk hesitated for a moment. He knew the question wasn't a simple one to answer. But he also knew that this moment was crucial. The outcome of the trial, his future, perhaps even the future of his companies, could hinge on the next few minutes. Your Honor, Musk began, his voice steady, I can't prove with traditional evidence what Orion knows. What I can tell you is this, there have been countless instances in my life where I've been faced with difficult choices, and Orion has been there, often giving me a sense of clarity when no one else could. When I'm uncertain, I look to him. And I believe he's never steered me wrong. Richard Gray shot up from his seat. This is absurd, he bellowed. We're in a courtroom, not a therapy session. Mr. Musk is trying to turn this trial into some sort of circus. If we allow this, this nonsense, we may as well start hiring fortune tellers and psychics to testify. Musk remained calm, his eyes locked on Orion, who had now raised his head slightly, as though sensing the shift in the room. The tension was palpable. Gray's voice was shrill, but Musk's was unwavering. This trial is about more than just facts. It's about uncovering the truth. And sometimes, the truth isn't something that can be measured with charts and numbers. Sometimes, the truth is something felt, something intuited. The room seemed to hold its breath. Musk had made his stand. But how could he possibly convince the jury, let alone the judge, that his claim wasn't just the rambling of a billionaire who had gone too far? Suddenly, the unexpected happened. Orion, who had been sitting motionless by Musk's side, stood up. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as the dog made his way to the center of the room, completely unprompted. Every eye was on him, a collective gasp spreading through the room. What was he doing? Musk's heart raced as Orion approached the witness stand. For a brief moment, it looked like the dog was about to jump up, as if he had every intention of giving his own testimony. But instead, he did something no one expected. Orion sat down directly in front of the defense table and, without a single sound, stared directly at Richard Gray, the prosecutor. For the briefest of moments, everything froze. Gray was visibly unsettled, his hand hovering over his papers, unsure of how to respond. The dog's gaze was unnervingly intense, as if he were analyzing Gray's every move, reading the man's every thought. It was as though Orion was not only sensing the emotions of the room but also understanding the underlying truths of the case. Then, as quickly as he had moved, Orion turned back toward Musk and trotted back to his side, settling down once more. He had completed his strange, silent journey, but something had shifted in the courtroom. The prosecution team was no longer mocking Musk. Even Gray seemed taken aback by what he had just witnessed. The judge cleared her throat, clearly shaken by what had just occurred. "Mr. Musk," she said, her tone softer now but still cautious, "this is highly irregular. But I cannot deny that something unusual just happened." Musk nodded slowly, sensing that the tide had shifted in his favor, if only slightly. "Your Honor," he said quietly, "I believe that Orion just proved something that words alone cannot. This is not a stunt. It's not a game. There's something real here. Something important." Richard Gray looked like he had just witnessed a ghost. He was still recovering from the strange display, but he knew better than to dismiss it entirely. I'm not sure how to proceed," he muttered under his breath. The judge's eyes were now softening, though her skepticism remained. "Let's take a recess. Everyone, please remain in your seats. We will reconvene in 15 minutes. As the judge adjourned the session, Musk leaned down to pet Orion, who looked up at him with calm, knowing eyes. Musk smiled, though it was a smile tinged with uncertainty. He had taken a bold step, one that could either lead to victory or further ridicule. But for now, the strange connection between him and his dog had made an undeniable impact. As the courtroom buzzed with murmurs of disbelief and speculation, Musk couldn't help but feel a surge of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, the truth was closer than anyone had realized. The dog's silent testimony had ignited something within the room, a spark of belief that couldn't be easily extinguished. Orion had done what Musk couldn't. He had silenced the critics, at least for a moment. Now, the trial would continue, but the stakes had risen, and Musk was ready for whatever would come next. The courtroom buzzed with whispers as the 15-minute recess came to a close. The judge, after her brief moment of contemplation, returned to her seat. There was a new tension in the air, but this time, it wasn't just about the case, it was about something deeper. Something inexplicable. The atmosphere had shifted, and even the jurors seemed to be on edge. The trial had taken an unexpected turn, and the truth, it seemed, was still as elusive as ever. Elon Musk stood up, his hands trembling slightly. Despite the calm he tried to project, there was an undeniable nervousness that had settled within him. The dog, Orion, sat at his feet, as if aware of the weight of the moment. Musk had hoped that the dog's actions had made an impact, but now, as he looked around the room, he realized that things were far from settled. In fact, they were more complicated than ever before. As the judge banged her gavel, signaling the resumption of the trial, all eyes fell on Musk. "Mr. Musk," the judge began, her voice now steadier but tinged with curiosity, "I've allowed this unorthodox behavior to continue. But we must now get back to the matter at hand. You've made some extraordinary claims, and it's time we address them directly." Musk nodded, his gaze never leaving Orion. "Your Honor," he said, his voice calm but resolute, "I know this trial is about facts, and I understand the skepticism surrounding my dog's involvement. But I'm asking you to look past the usual methods of proof and consider the possibility that truth can be recognized in ways we can't always explain." The judge sighed, clearly weary of the philosophical debate. "Mr. Musk, I've indulged you long enough. But if you're trying to convince the court that your dog is some kind of emotional or spiritual guide, I'm afraid I cannot entertain such claims further." Musk felt his chest tighten. He had come so far, he had risked everything to prove that there was more to this case than cold, hard evidence. And now, the last hurdle stood before him, convincing the judge and jury that what he had said was true. He needed to make them believe. Not in a fantasy or some illogical story, but in something real, a connection beyond reason, something that transcended conventional understanding. "Your Honor," Musk said, his voice unwavering, "I understand your frustration. I do. But let me share something with you. Something that I've never shared with anyone before." The room grew quiet, the weight of Musk's words hanging in the air. Everyone, including the judge and the prosecution, leaned in, sensing the gravity of what was about to unfold. Musk continued, his voice tinged with emotion. "Orion was with me during some of the most difficult moments of my life. When I started SpaceX, when I was on the brink of bankruptcy, when Tesla seemed like it might fail, Orion was always there. And when I was on the verge of making decisions that could have destroyed everything, he would look at me. He'd stare at me with those eyes, and I'd know. I'd know what was right. He wasn't just a pet, he was a part of me. He gave me strength when I had none left. He kept me grounded." A hush fell over the room. For the first time, Musk's voice cracked, and there was a vulnerability in his words that hadn't been there before. The walls he had built up over the years, those walls of confidence and invincibility, seemed to crumble in front of everyone. The prosecution's attorney, Richard Gray, was taken aback. His earlier smugness had been replaced with a momentary silence. He hadn't expected this, no one had. Musk wasn't just defending himself against legal allegations, he was laying bare a part of himself that few had ever seen. He was speaking of his soul, of a bond so deep that it defied explanation. As Musk paused, Orion, who had been sitting quietly beside him, looked up at the dog. The animal's eyes, deep and knowing, seemed to reflect a quiet understanding of the magnitude of the moment. "I'm not here to present a perfect story," Musk continued. "But I am here to tell the truth. Not the kind of truth that fits neatly into charts or statistics, but the kind of truth that's felt. Orion never lied to me. He never steered me wrong. And when I was facing the hardest choices of my life, he was my anchor." The judge's stern expression softened, though she remained quiet, digesting Musk's words. The tension in the courtroom was palpable, and even the jurors, who had once doubted Musk's sincerity, seemed to be reconsidering everything. Richard Gray cleared his throat, his voice now quieter, almost somber. "Mr. Musk, you're asking us to take a leap of faith, to believe in something that we cannot quantify. You're asking us to place trust in a dog, to believe that he holds the key to the truth of this case. How do you expect us to do that?" Musk, undeterred, turned toward Gray. "I'm not asking you to believe in the dog. I'm asking you to consider that sometimes, the truth doesn't have to be something that can be measured. Sometimes, the truth is a feeling, a connection that goes beyond logic. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then, slowly, the judge nodded. I understand your point, Mr. Musk. And while I may not fully comprehend the nature of your connection with this dog, I can see that it's genuine. And I can see that it's important to you. The room fell still. The jury, the prosecution, and even the defense team seemed to hold their breath. It was as if the entire trial had been building up to this single moment, the moment when Musk bared his soul, when he took a step into the unknown, and asked the court to do the same. For the first time, the court seemed to acknowledge that there were things beyond the scope of conventional law, things that couldn't be explained by cold evidence or rational argument alone. Musk glanced at Orion, who gave him a small, knowing nod, as if to say, "We've got this." Musk smiled slightly. It was a smile of relief, of hope. But the road ahead was still uncertain. The trial was far from over, and the questions of fraud and manipulation still loomed large. But in this moment, Musk knew something had shifted. He had reached the jury's heart. He had let them see that, while the truth could be elusive, it was still possible to find it in the most unexpected places, even in the silent gaze of a dog. The court session resumed after a brief pause, and the room was still charged with the energy of Musk's emotional testimony. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, as if the weight of his words and the unexpected presence of Orion had changed the very course of the trial. There was an undeniable shift in the room, and the dynamics of the courtroom had shifted in Musk's favor in ways no one could have anticipated. As Musk sat back down beside Orion, the dog's calm presence seemed to anchor him. Despite the upheaval in the courtroom, Musk felt a quiet sense of peace. For the first time in what seemed like forever, he wasn't fighting against the world. He wasn't struggling against the media, the legal battles, or even the accusations being hurled at him. In that moment it was just him and his dog, two beings who had endured so much together, both driven by a bond deeper than the most complicated legal brief. The judge, still processing the unexpected turn of events, motioned for the court to continue. "Mr. Gray," she said, her voice more neutral now, "you may proceed with your case, but know that this has become a much more nuanced discussion. Let us move forward." Richard Gray, who had been momentarily thrown off by Musk's impassioned speech and Orion's startling behavior, straightened his tie and cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor. Of course." He turned back to the jury, now composed, though the air in the courtroom felt markedly different. His voice, while still sharp and commanding, lacked the same unshakable confidence that it had before. Gray resumed his argument, but there was an edge to his tone that hadn't been there before. The battle lines were no longer as clearly drawn. In the wake of Musk's raw admission, even the prosecutor seemed to struggle to regain his footing. He was no longer just challenging Musk's claims on technical grounds, he was up against something intangible, something that couldn't easily be dismissed. The defense team, too, had regained their composure. They had witnessed the subtle but crucial shift in the jury's demeanor, and Musk's personal testimony had clearly had an effect. The truth Musk had shared was not just a defense against the accusations, it was a moment of vulnerability, one that had humanized him in ways that no lawyer's argument ever could. It had made him relatable in a way that few could ever have anticipated. As the trial progressed into its closing hours, the courtroom grew quieter. The jurors were deep in thought, reflecting on the events of the day. Many of them exchanged glances, whispering quietly to each other, but no one seemed to doubt that the trial had reached a critical juncture. Even the judge, who had seen countless cases before, was grappling with something new, a truth that transcended the courtroom's usual rules and conventions. Later, as the day came to a close, Musk left the courtroom, Orion following closely behind. The press had already gathered outside, cameras flashing as they bombarded him with questions. But Musk wasn't interested in their inquiries. He had faced their scrutiny for years, and while he still had a role to play in the media circus, this moment wasn't about him, it was about the bond he shared with Orion. He smiled softly as the dog walked by his side. They had both been through so much together, and no matter how the trial played out, that bond remained unshakable. In the privacy of his car, Musk leaned back in the seat, exhaustion settling into his bones. The journey had been long, filled with unexpected twists and turns, but he felt as though he had finally found a moment of peace, an unspoken understanding that transcended the courtroom's rigid walls. He glanced down at Orion, who sat quietly at his feet. "You did it," Musk murmured, his voice barely a whisper. "We did it." Orion looked up at him, his dark eyes filled with a quiet, knowing understanding. The dog had been the one constant in Musk's chaotic life. Through the highs, the lows, the victories, and the setbacks, Orion had never wavered. And now, more than ever, Musk realized just how much that companionship had meant. It was a reminder that no matter how far he pushed the boundaries of science, technology, or business, there were some things, some connections, that couldn't be explained, but only felt. Back in the courtroom, as the trial wound down and the closing arguments were presented, the jurors seemed increasingly captivated by the personal stakes of the case. They had all witnessed Musk's vulnerability, his willingness to bare his soul, and it had left an indelible impression. The truth of the trial was no longer just about a legal case or an accusation of fraud. It had become about understanding the human condition, about the bonds we form with one another and with the animals that share our lives. As the final arguments were made and the jury prepared to deliberate, the judge allowed one final comment from Musk. He stood and, with a calm yet purposeful voice, addressed the room one last time. "Your Honor, members of the jury, I know that what I've shared today might seem unconventional. But I believe that truth is not always something that can be proven with evidence alone. Sometimes, it's something that's felt. I stand here not just as a businessman or as a defendant in this case. I stand here as someone who has been fortunate enough to find something more, something beyond logic and reason. And if we let that truth guide us, I believe we can make a decision that reflects something deeper than just what's written on paper." The room was silent. The jury exchanged looks once more, and the weight of Musk's words hung in the air, leaving everyone to ponder what had just been shared. Hours later, the jury filed back into the courtroom, and the judge instructed them to deliver their verdict. The room held its collective breath, and the world outside seemed to pause as the decision was read aloud. Elon Musk, the foreman of the jury, began, "We the jury find in favor of the defendant on all charges." The courtroom erupted into stunned silence. Musk felt a mixture of relief and disbelief wash over him. His heart pounded in his chest, but he wasn't just relieved for himself. He was relieved for Orion, for the silent witness who had stood by him through everything. As Musk stood and turned toward the door, his mind was filled with reflections. He knew this trial was more than just a legal battle. It was a moment of self-discovery, a journey that had brought him closer to understanding not just the truth of his case, but the deeper truths of life. He glanced down at Orion, who was still at his side, his loyal companion through it all. And for the first time, Elon Musk allowed himself to truly believe that sometimes, the most profound truths are not the ones we see with our eyes, but the ones we feel with our hearts. The air was electric with anticipation as Elon Musk stepped out of the courtroom, surrounded by reporters and photographers. The verdict had been delivered, and while the world was still digesting the outcome, Musk was already processing something much deeper, a realization that this trial, this bizarre twist of fate involving his dog, had changed him in ways he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just a legal victory. It felt like a personal transformation. Outside the courthouse, a crowd of reporters surged forward, their cameras flashing. Questions were thrown at him from every direction. "Mr. Musk, how does it feel to have the charges dropped? Is this the end of the legal battles, or just the beginning?" Musk walked calmly, his gaze steady and resolute, as Orion trotted at his side, ever the silent companion. There were no signs of exhaustion on Musk's face, only a deep sense of quiet satisfaction. The battle for his reputation and future had been long and grueling, but it was over. For now. "I don't think it's about the victory," Musk said to a reporter who was quick to catch up with him. It's about understanding. About how, sometimes, things happen that can't be explained by conventional wisdom. I'm not here to fight science or the logic of the court. I'm here to tell a different kind of truth, a truth that might be harder to grasp but is no less real. The reporter, though confused by Musk's words, quickly scribbled them down. She had been trained to ask questions and write stories based on facts, but there was something intangible about this moment. Something that didn't fit the mold of a typical headline. Musk had won, yes, but the true story seemed to be deeper than that. The words about his dog, the bond they shared, the raw vulnerability, it was clear to her that the story would write itself. She just wasn't sure what the headline would be. As Musk entered his car, Orion hopped in beside him, curling up on the seat. The car doors closed, and they drove off, leaving the bustling scene behind. The verdict had been a relief, yes. But there was something more profound in the back of his mind. He had never anticipated the emotional journey he would undergo during this case. The truth had been revealed, not in the form of airtight evidence or strategic defense, but through raw emotion and a connection that transcended conventional understanding. His mind wandered to the moments when the courtroom had been silent, save for his voice, speaking truths about his life with Orion. He hadn't just been defending himself, he had been revealing parts of his soul that few people ever saw. It was a side of him that he had kept hidden from the public eye, a side that didn't fit the image of the tech billionaire, the innovator, the futurist. It was the side of him that was deeply human. And in that vulnerability, he had found an unexpected strength. But the victory wasn't just his. It belonged to Orion too. The dog had played an undeniable role in the case, a role that could never be fully understood by the outside world. For Musk, Orion was more than just a pet. He was a partner, a guide, a symbol of resilience. Musk's thoughts drifted to his early days at Tesla and SpaceX, when things had looked bleak. He had been on the verge of giving up on numerous occasions. But Orion had always been there, his quiet presence offering comfort when Musk had none left. He thought about the many sleepless nights, the endless challenges, and how, no matter how difficult things got, Orion never left his side. Musk smiled softly, glancing at the dog. "You've always known the way, haven't you, buddy?" Orion's eyes met Musk's, and for a brief moment, there was a shared understanding between them. It wasn't about the trial. It wasn't about the victory. It was about something deeper, the unspoken bond they shared, the trust and loyalty that had carried them through the toughest times. In the days that followed, the media picked up on the bizarre, unexpected nature of Musk's defense. Headlines flooded in from across the world. Elon Musk claims dog helped save him in court, trial of the century, dog's silent support key to Musk's victory, and even Elon Musk's emotional defense. Is this the future of legal battles? Public opinion was divided. Some believed Musk's testimony was a moment of pure genius, revealing a side of him that many had never seen before. Others thought it was an elaborate publicity stunt, an attempt to paint himself as a misunderstood visionary. But the fact remained, Musk had done something no one expected. He had turned a legal battle into a deeply personal journey, one that blurred the lines between logic and emotion, science and feeling. At the same time, new questions arose. Was there more to this bond between Musk and Orion than anyone realized? Could there be a deeper, more spiritual connection at play? What did it mean for the future of technology and human-animal relationships? The questions were endless, and the world was captivated by the mystery Musk had inadvertently created. Behind closed doors, however, Musk found himself in quiet reflection, no longer concerned with public opinion. The trial was over, but there was still much to process. He had always been someone who prided himself on being ahead of the curve, on innovating and pushing boundaries. But this moment had taught him something new, that sometimes, the most profound insights came not from technology or space exploration, but from the quiet companionship of a dog who had stood by him through it all. Elon Musk was a man of science, a man of ideas, but in that moment, he was also a man who had learned the value of connection, of the things that couldn't be measured, explained, or quantified. As he walked into his home, with Orion at his side, Musk's thoughts turned to the future. There were still ventures to build, new worlds to explore, and challenges to conquer. But now, he knew that the true measure of success wasn't just about rockets to Mars or electric cars, it was about the relationships we build, the connections that shape us, and the quiet moments that ground us. And with that, Musk had taken a step toward a new understanding of the world. One where even the most extraordinary people could find strength in the most ordinary of places. The weeks following the trial were both exhilarating and disorienting for Elon Musk. The court case, which had once felt like an insurmountable obstacle, was now behind him. But it had left an imprint on his life, one that would forever alter how he viewed himself and the world around him. The trial had thrust him into the global spotlight in ways he hadn't expected, and now, more than ever, his life felt like it was in a constant state of flux. The media storm didn't die down after the verdict. If anything, it intensified. Musk had always been a figure of intrigue and fascination, but now, he was something else entirely. He was a symbol of vulnerability, of a man who had used an unexpected ally, his dog, to turn the tide in a high-profile legal battle. The bizarre nature of the case had captured the imagination of millions around the world, and the story of Elon Musk and Orion was one that seemed to have a life of its own. Musk found himself answering questions that went beyond business and technology. Reporters asked about his relationship with Orion, probing into the bond between man and dog that had become so central to the trial. They asked him about his emotional state, his childhood, and his views on life and love. It was as though the world wanted to dissect every corner of his being, trying to find meaning in the most mundane details of his existence. In private moments, Musk often felt overwhelmed. He had always been someone who preferred to keep his personal life out of the public eye, but now, it felt as though every move he made was scrutinized, every word analyzed. It was a strange sensation, knowing that people were constantly trying to figure him out, even though he wasn't sure he had figured himself out yet. He sat in his office late one evening, looking over emails and messages from colleagues and business partners. But his mind kept drifting back to the courtroom, to that moment when Orion had sat beside him, calm and unwavering, in the midst of the storm. He couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed since then, not just in terms of his legal battles, but in his understanding of what really mattered in life. He looked over at Orion, who was lounging on the floor, his calm presence a stark contrast to the chaos that had surrounded them. The dog's serene demeanor was a reminder of the simplicity and quiet strength that had carried Musk through the toughest parts of his life. The connection they shared was undeniable, and it was something Musk knew he couldn't explain to anyone. It wasn't something that could be quantified or measured by metrics. It was a feeling, pure and simple. As Musk stared at his phone screen, he couldn't help but notice how the world had begun to shift around him. People were treating him differently. Colleagues who had once been distant now reached out, offering congratulations and support. Investors were more eager than ever to meet with him, eager to be associated with the man who had, in a sense, come out victorious not just in court but in the court of public opinion. But amid all this attention, Musk couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Yes, the legal victory was important, and yes, the spotlight was something he had become accustomed to. But deep down, he knew that the world's fascination with him, his wealth, his genius, his innovations, wasn't the whole story. It was the personal connections, the people he cared about, the relationships he had built over the years, that truly mattered. And in this new world of post-trial fame, Musk found himself grappling with a new reality. He was no longer just a tech mogul or a visionary. He was also a man who had been vulnerable, who had exposed a part of himself that the world had never seen before. His connection with Orion had made him more human in the eyes of the public, and while he didn't mind the empathy that had come from it, he also felt the weight of it. For the first time, he understood what it meant to be truly seen. To not just be admired for his achievements, but to be understood on a deeper level. And with that understanding came a certain loneliness. The world had watched him fight, watched him win, but no one knew what it felt like to be him, to be the person who had lived through the ups and downs of life, to be the person who had experienced the crushing weight of failure and the soaring heights of success. Musk looked at Orion again, his loyal companion, and for a moment, he was at peace. In a world full of chaos and noise, the dog's silent presence was the only constant that Musk could rely on. Orion didn't care about the headlines or the attention. He didn't care about the legal battles or the millions of people watching. All he cared about was being there for Musk, through thick and thin. As Musk leaned back in his chair, reflecting on everything that had happened, he realized that this moment of stillness, this brief reprieve from the madness, was exactly what he needed. The world could spin around him, the headlines could continue to write themselves, but in the end, it was Orion who had been there through it all. And that was enough. The next morning, Musk received a call from his close friend and fellow entrepreneur, Jeff Bezos. "Congrats, Elon," Bezos said with a chuckle in his voice. "I've got to hand it to you. I never saw that coming." Musk smiled, his eyes still a bit tired from the previous day's events. "Thanks, Jeff. Honestly, it feels like it's just sinking in now. It's been a wild ride, but I'm glad it's over." Bezos paused, as if weighing his words. "I know this might sound odd, but, how are you really doing? I mean, we both know what it's like to live under the microscope. But this is different. The whole world is watching you. It can be a lot, man." Musk appreciated the concern in Bezos's voice. It wasn't often that someone like Jeff would ask how he was really doing, especially after a major public event. It was a rare moment of candor between the two men, and for a moment, Musk felt a sense of camaraderie. "I'm okay," Musk replied after a long pause. "I think I'm just realizing that there's more to life than the business, the headlines, all of that. It's the people around you, the ones who stick by you no matter what, that matter most. And for me, that's Orion." Bezos laughed softly. "You've got a good head on your shoulders, Elon. But just remember, you're not alone in this. If you ever need someone to talk to, you know where I am." Musk smiled, grateful for the support. "Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate that." The days after the trial had been a whirlwind for Elon Musk, with constant media attention, public scrutiny, and the added pressure of maintaining the facade of being a flawless tech mogul. But beneath the surface of his newfound fame, a different reality was starting to take shape, one that Musk wasn't sure how to navigate. The world had seen him in a new light, and for the first time in his career, people were looking beyond his visionary mind and accomplishments. They were intrigued by his vulnerability, by the strange bond he shared with his dog Orion, and by the bizarre turn of events in the courtroom. The story of Musk's defense, his emotional testimony and the unusual role Orion had played, had captivated millions, and with it, came a torrent of questions and expectations that Musk wasn't prepared for. Despite the overwhelming support he had received, Musk found himself struggling with the sheer weight of it all. The world expected him to be more than just a businessman. They wanted him to be a symbol of resilience, of the underdog who overcame adversity and emerged victorious. They wanted him to be a leader, not just in technology, but in every sense of the word. But Elon Musk was starting to realize that the expectations placed on him were not entirely aligned with who he was. For so long, he had been the one setting the agenda, the one who had been the driving force behind SpaceX, Tesla, and countless other ventures. Now, he found himself caught in a narrative that wasn't entirely his own, a narrative of public perception that he couldn't control. One evening, after a long day of meetings and interviews, Musk found himself in the comfort of his private office at SpaceX headquarters. The lights were dim, the hum of the building's machinery a constant reminder of the work that needed to be done. Orion lay at his feet, as usual, his calming presence a welcome contrast to the whirlwind of thoughts racing through Musk's mind. Musk leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming on the desk. The weight of the expectations was becoming unbearable. There were whispers that he might be asked to run for political office, that his role as a public figure was now more than just business, it was a moral and philosophical leadership position. The pressure to live up to that was suffocating. He had never been one to shy away from challenges, but this was different. In his mind, there was only one thing that truly mattered: pushing humanity forward. Whether it was through colonizing Mars or accelerating the world's transition to sustainable energy, Musk had always been driven by a singular vision of the future. But now, it felt like the world wanted him to be something more, a symbol of hope, of wisdom, of universal truth. And that wasn't something he had ever planned for. Orion stirred, as if sensing his owner's inner turmoil. Musk looked down at the dog, who simply gazed up at him with those deep, understanding eyes. For a moment, it was as if time stood still. There were no cameras, no reporters, no expectations. Just the quiet companionship of a creature who had stood by him through it all. "Buddy," Musk whispered, his voice barely audible. "What am I supposed to do now?" Orion let out a soft whine and nudged Musk's hand, as if offering silent comfort. It was a gesture that brought Musk back to the present. It reminded him that he wasn't alone in this. Despite all the external noise and pressure, he still had his trusted companion by his side, someone who didn't care about the headlines, the fame, or the political whispers. Orion cared only about him. Musk stood up from his desk and walked over to the window, gazing out at the night sky. The stars were bright, and for a brief moment, he imagined what it might be like to escape all of this. To leave Earth behind and travel to Mars, where the weight of expectations was non-existent. The idea was tempting, almost seductive. But he knew deep down that his work here wasn't done. Mars would have to wait. The quiet hum of the office was interrupted by a knock at the door. Musk turned to see one of his assistants, a young woman named Sarah, standing in the doorway. She hesitated before speaking. "Mr. Musk, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you. They said it's urgent." Musk sighed, running a hand through his hair. The world never seemed to stop spinning. "Who is it?" "It's a reporter from the Times. She insists on speaking with you, says it's about the trial." Musk nodded, his mind racing. Another interview? Another round of questions about his personal life? The exhaustion was starting to set in. But this wasn't just about his career anymore. It was about his identity, how he was seen, how he was perceived. He wasn't sure he could keep up with the constant demands. "All right," Musk said, "send her in." A few moments later, a young reporter entered the room. She looked eager, yet slightly apprehensive, as if she wasn't entirely sure how to approach the man who had become a global sensation. Her name was Emily, and she had an inquisitive look in her eyes, a mixture of admiration and curiosity. "Mr. Musk, thank you for seeing me," Emily began, her voice slightly trembling as she spoke. "I know you've been through a lot lately, but I just wanted to ask, how has the trial and everything that came with it changed your outlook on life?" Musk took a moment before responding, his gaze shifting toward Orion, who had now settled on the floor, seemingly content. "I think it's made me realize something important," Musk began slowly, his voice steady. "That sometimes the things we take for granted, the people, the animals, the relationships, are what really make life worth living. We can get so caught up in the race for progress, for success, for the next big thing, that we forget about the little things that actually matter." Emily was quiet for a moment, processing his words. Musk could tell she hadn't expected such an honest, introspective answer. "Do you think the public will see you differently now?" Emily asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Musk chuckled softly. "I think the public will see whatever they want to see. But I'm not interested in fitting into anyone's mold. I've spent my life trying to create the future, and that's what I'll continue to do. But in the process, I've learned that it's not just about the machines and the rockets. It's about the people who are with you along the way. It's about connection. That's the real force that drives us forward." Emily nodded, her eyes softening. "That's powerful. Thank you for sharing that with me, Mr. Musk. As the interview wrapped up and Emily left, Musk sat back in his chair, a sense of calm settling over him. Maybe he couldn't control how the world saw him, but he could control what he focused on. He could control the work he did, the people he surrounded himself with, and the relationships that mattered most. And for now, that was enough. Elon Musk's world had been irrevocably altered, but in a way he hadn't fully anticipated. The media frenzy that had surrounded his bizarre courtroom saga was not just a fleeting moment, it had shifted the very foundation of his public persona. No longer was he merely seen as a business tycoon, a brilliant mind pushing the boundaries of technology in space exploration. Now, he was someone who had revealed vulnerability in the most unexpected way. The courtroom incident had peeled back the layers of Elon Musk, and the world now saw him as something more human, more relatable than ever before. But with this new visibility came new challenges. The question was no longer just about technology, rockets, and electric cars, it was about how he would adapt to this unforeseen reality. Musk found himself in a paradox. The fame he had once avoided was now inescapable, and the public's fascination with his life had only intensified. People now looked to him for guidance, not just in business, but in matters of the heart and soul. The curious blend of public fascination and admiration was both overwhelming and confusing for someone who had always preferred to remain in the shadows of his ventures. Musk sat in his home one night, Orion curled up beside him on the couch, and his thoughts drifted to the future. A sense of unease lingered, like a shadow he couldn't escape. The noise from the media had grown louder, and now, more than ever, he felt like he was under constant surveillance. But it wasn't the kind of scrutiny he had once been accustomed to, it wasn't about his work, his ideas, or his innovations. It was personal. It was about him, the man, not the visionary. As the weeks passed, Musk found himself pulled in different directions. There were board meetings and strategic discussions, as expected, but they often felt disconnected from the greater purpose he had always strived toward. His vision for the future of humanity was grand, Mars, sustainable energy, artificial intelligence, but now, he couldn't shake the feeling that the path he had been walking was not entirely his own. It was shaped by the expectations of others, the ever-watchful eyes of the public, and the incessant demand for him to embody more than just the future of technology. Late one evening, after a particularly grueling day of meetings, Musk found himself pacing in his living room. Orion, sensing his agitation, followed him closely, as if offering silent support. Musk paused and looked down at the dog, his mind racing. "I don't know what to do, buddy," Musk muttered to Orion, his voice tinged with frustration. "The world expects me to be something I'm not. They want me to be this perfect leader, this symbol of hope, but I'm just a man, like anyone else." Orion sat up, his gaze unwavering, as if trying to understand the weight of Musk's words. There was something grounding about his loyal companion, something that reminded Musk of what truly mattered in the chaos of his life. The next day, as Musk prepared for yet another round of interviews, he received a text message from his longtime friend and collaborator, Gwynne Shotwell. She was the president of SpaceX, and they had worked together for years, building the company into one of the most successful space ventures in the world. Her message was simple: "Elon, we need to talk. Meet me at the office." Musk quickly agreed and headed to the SpaceX headquarters, his mind already swirling with thoughts of what might be on her mind. He had worked alongside Gwynne through countless highs and lows, and her insight had always been invaluable to him. But today, something felt different. The weight of his personal life seemed to creep into his professional world, and Musk wasn't sure how to separate the two anymore. When he arrived at the office, Gwynne was already waiting in her usual spot, a corner office with a stunning view of the SpaceX launch site. She stood as Musk entered, her face serious but not unkind. They exchanged a brief greeting before she gestured for him to sit. "Elon," she began, her tone measured but firm, "I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened recently. The trial, the media circus, the way your personal life has been thrust into the spotlight. And I've been wondering how this is affecting you. Not just as a public figure, but as a person." Musk sighed, leaning back in his chair. He had never been one to open up easily, but with Gwyn, he felt a sense of trust. She had seen him through the toughest moments of his career, and she was one of the few people who understood him beyond the headlines. "It's overwhelming," Gwyn, Musk admitted, rubbing his temples. "I've always been driven by this need to push boundaries, to change the world. But now, it feels like I'm not even sure who I am anymore. I don't know how to separate the Elon that the world sees from the Elon I know myself to be." Gwyn nodded, her eyes softening with understanding. "That's a difficult position to be in. The pressure to be more than just a businessman, to embody something larger than yourself, it's a lot for anyone to handle. But you don't have to do it alone. We're all in this together, and I think you need to remember why you started all of this in the first place." Musk looked at her, confusion flickering in his eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean," she continued, "you've always been about the future. About technology. About building things that last. But maybe now it's time to take a step back and focus on something else. You're a person, Elon, not a symbol. Maybe it's time to embrace the parts of you that you've always kept hidden, the parts that make you who you are beyond the headlines." Musk sat in silence, letting her words sink in. Gwyn was right, of course. He had spent so much time trying to be everything the world wanted him to be that he had forgotten the essence of who he truly was. He had become so consumed with the future of humanity that he had lost sight of the present. "I've been running so fast, Gwyn," Musk finally said, his voice quiet. "And maybe I've forgotten how to just be. Just to live." Gwyn smiled, her expression warm and understanding. "It's never too late to start living, Elon. The future will still be there when you're ready to come back to it." As Musk left SpaceX that day, his mind was still reeling from the conversation. He had always prided himself on being forward-thinking, but now he realized that perhaps it was time to shift his focus. It wasn't just about achieving grand goals anymore, it was about living authentically and embracing the unexpected moments along the way. Musk returned home to find Orion waiting for him, as usual, at the door. The dog's wagging tail seemed to be a silent reminder of the simplicity and joy that still existed in his life, even amidst the chaos. Musk smiled, kneeling down to pet Orion. "Maybe you're right, buddy," he said softly. "Maybe it's time to let go of the weight of the world and just focus on what really matters." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. How do you think Musk is going to find balance between his vision for the future and his personal life? What would you do in his position? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for more updates on his journey. It had been weeks since Elon Musk had that pivotal conversation with Gwyn Shotwell, and while the weight of the world still lingered on his shoulders, something inside him had shifted. For the first time in a long while, he began to step back, allowing himself to just be, to exist without the constant hum of expectations, without the relentless drive to push the boundaries of science and space. But change didn't come easily to Musk. He was used to moving at full throttle, always racing ahead to the next project, the next innovation. Slowing down felt almost foreign to him. Yet, as he sat quietly at his desk late one evening, staring out of the large windows of his California home, he couldn't help but feel the need for this pause. It wasn't just a break from work, it was a break from the constant noise that had defined his life for years. The soft rustling of the wind against the windows, the distant hum of the city, and the comforting sound of Orion's breathing beside him were the only things that kept him grounded in that moment. Musk's thoughts wandered. He thought about his past decisions, his ambitions, the long nights spent strategizing, the failures that had felt like crushing defeats, and the triumphs that had brought him here, to this point in his life. He realized that despite all the progress he had made, there were parts of him that had been neglected along the way, parts of him that longed for more than just success. There had always been a single-minded focus on the future, on building something revolutionary. But now, in the stillness of the night, Musk started to understand that perhaps the revolution wasn't just about technology. Perhaps it was about embracing the present, about learning to navigate the complexities of being human, in all its messiness and imperfection. He glanced down at Orion, who had settled at his feet, the dog's soft eyes watching him with a sense of understanding that Musk couldn't quite put into words. For a moment, he felt a deep connection, not just to his dog, but to the quiet, peaceful simplicity that Orion represented. Musk realized that Orion didn't care about Mars or electric cars. Orion didn't even care about the trial or the media circus that had been so overwhelming. All that mattered to the dog was Musk, the man who had always been there for him. Maybe it's time to focus on the things that matter the most, huh, buddy? Musk whispered to the dog. Orion's tail thumped softly in response, as if in agreement. The next day, as Musk walked through the quiet halls of SpaceX, he found himself reflecting on the conversation he had with Gwyn. There had been so many moments in his career where he had felt like he had to prove something, prove that he could be the best, prove that he could change the world, prove that he wasn't just another entrepreneur. But now, he wasn't so sure anymore. What was it all for if he couldn't find peace within himself? What good was all the progress if he couldn't enjoy the journey? Musk wasn't about to abandon his vision for the future, but he was beginning to understand that there was a balance to be struck. He had been so obsessed with the destination that he had lost sight of the importance of the steps along the way, the moments of stillness, of connection, and of self-reflection. He could still push the boundaries of technology, but perhaps now, he would do so with a greater sense of mindfulness. As the days passed, Musk made small changes. He began to carve out time in his schedule for moments of quiet reflection, for taking walks with Orion, for connecting with friends and family. He even started to engage in hobbies that he had once forgotten, reading for pleasure, tinkering with ideas not related to rockets or cars, and simply sitting in silence to clear his mind. The changes weren't radical, but they were enough to make a difference. Musk found that, in the midst of all his achievements and obligations, he could still create space for the things that mattered most. And perhaps, that was the true revolution. One evening, after spending a quiet afternoon with his children and enjoying a family dinner, Musk received a call from a reporter at the New York Times. He had been approached many times for interviews, but something about this particular call felt different. "Mr. Musk, I hope you're doing well," the reporter's voice crackled through the phone. "I know that the past few months have been overwhelming, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to share your thoughts on where things stand now. How do you feel about the trial, and what's next for you?" Musk paused for a moment, considering the question. It wasn't the first time he had been asked about the trial, but now, his perspective had changed. He no longer felt the need to be defensive or combative. He didn't need to prove anything. He had lived through the storm, and now he was ready to talk about what he had learned. "I think the trial taught me something important," Musk said, his voice steady. "It taught me that sometimes the most unexpected things happen, things that we can't control. But it also taught me that how we respond to those things is what defines us. I've spent so much of my life pushing toward the future, but I've come to realize that the present is just as important. The relationships we build, the moments we share, they shape who we are. And right now, I'm focused on living more authentically, more present, in a way that aligns with the values I hold dear." The reporter was silent for a moment, processing his words. Then, she asked, "Do you think this shift will affect your work with SpaceX and Tesla?" Musk thought about it carefully. "I think it will. I've always believed that progress and innovation go hand in hand with pushing the boundaries of what's possible. But now, I realize that it's also about creating a sustainable future for everyone, not just through technology, but through the way we live, the way we connect, and the way we care for each other. That's what I'm working toward now." The reporter thanked him, and the conversation ended. Musk sat back in his chair, letting the words linger in his mind. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace, an understanding that he didn't have to have all the answers, and that sometimes, the answers came when you stopped looking so hard. Later that night, Musk took a walk with Orion, the cool night air refreshing against his face. The stars were particularly bright, and for a moment, he felt connected to something larger than himself. Not just the vision of a future on Mars, but the simple beauty of the universe itself, the vastness, the mystery, and the possibilities. Maybe, just maybe, the future wasn't something to be raced toward. It was something to be embraced in its own time. As Elon Musk continued to settle into his newfound rhythm, finding peace in moments of stillness and reflection, life had a way of pulling him back into the whirlwind of the future. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, as he was making his way to his Tesla office in Palo Alto, a phone call disrupted his calm. It was an unexpected call, a call that would change the trajectory of his current path. "Mr. Musk, this is Laura from the White House," the voice on the other end said. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Musk, taken aback, adjusted the Bluetooth in his car and cleared his throat. "No, not at all. What's going on?" There was a slight pause before Laura continued. "The president would like to speak with you. There's an opportunity on the table that he believes your expertise could be invaluable in. He's asking if you would be available for a brief discussion later today." The President of the United States. Musk was no stranger to high-profile calls, but this one felt different. The gravity of it struck him. He had spent his career in the private sector, moving fast and breaking things. Yet, now he was being asked to step into a world that was beyond corporate goals and business deals. This was about the nation, the future of the country, and perhaps the world. "Sure," Musk replied, trying to remain composed, but he couldn't hide the curiosity and slight trepidation in his voice. "I'll be available. Let's make it happen." By the time the call was scheduled, Musk had already begun to feel the weight of what he was about to step into. He had always been reluctant to involve himself directly in politics. He preferred to stay focused on innovation, technology, and space exploration. But the opportunity being presented to him seemed too significant to ignore. When the call finally came through, Musk found himself in a more serious headspace than he was used to. He had a deep respect for the role the government played, but his primary focus had always been to make progress through his companies. How could he contribute to a discussion that transcended his usual expertise? "Mr. Musk, thank you for taking the time," the president's voice resonated through the line. "We're facing a moment in history, and we need minds like yours to help shape it. The country's infrastructure is being threatened by climate change, and we need to act fast. I want to discuss how your companies, Tesla, SpaceX, and beyond, could be instrumental in turning things around. Your thoughts on sustainable energy, space exploration, and technological innovation could play a pivotal role in our future." Musk leaned back, the gravity of the situation settling on his shoulders. "I've been working on solutions to these issues for years, but it's always been a private effort. The scale of something like this, it's a lot bigger than anything I've tackled before." The president's tone softened. "We know. That's why we're reaching out. The impact of what's happening is massive, and your experience could provide us with the vision we need to make a real difference. I'm not asking you to take over, it's about collaboration. We need you in the conversation, to guide and advise as we face the future." The idea of stepping into the public eye, of using his influence for something larger than profit or personal ambition, stirred a mix of excitement and apprehension in Musk. It was what he had always dreamed of, the chance to change the world on a grand scale. But it also represented a new layer of responsibility, one that extended far beyond the walls of his companies. "I'll need to think about it," Musk said, his voice calm but firm. "But I believe in the future of humanity, and I'm willing to explore how I can help. Let me get back to you soon." The call ended with a sense of finality, and Musk sat still for a few moments, allowing the words to sink in. His mind raced with possibilities, strategies, and the weight of what he had just been asked to consider. There was a part of him that wanted to jump at the opportunity, to dive in headfirst as he had always done with his companies. But there was also the quiet voice inside of him, the one that had started to question the meaning of it all, the voice that reminded him that he couldn't ignore the balance he had been trying to find in his life. The next few days passed in a blur as Musk weighed the decision. He spent hours at SpaceX, in meetings with his engineers, refining the designs for the next generation of rockets. Then, he shifted focus to Tesla, discussing strategies for accelerating the transition to sustainable energy. But in the back of his mind, the president's offer kept resurfacing. Could he contribute in a way that aligned with his values, or would stepping into the political arena only derail the personal growth he had been striving for? It wasn't just about politics, it was about the future of humanity. It was about a world that was rapidly changing, and Musk knew that the right moves, at the right time, could make all the difference. That evening, as Musk sat at his kitchen table, Orion lying at his feet, he found himself reflecting once again. What had he learned in recent months? What was the greater purpose behind all of his work, and how did it fit into this new chapter? As he absent-mindedly scratched behind Orion's ears, a sense of clarity washed over him. It wasn't just about building a future in space. It was about ensuring a future here, on Earth. The decision became clear. The next morning, Musk contacted the White House to confirm his willingness to engage in the initiative. He would use his expertise and resources, not to control the narrative, but to contribute in a way that could help create a sustainable future for everyone. It would be a partnership, a blending of innovation with governance, of private sector ingenuity with public sector collaboration. Musk wasn't naive. He knew that politics were messy and that change didn't happen overnight. But he also knew that he couldn't ignore the responsibility he felt to use his position for good. If he could help solve the problems facing the world, if he could be a voice in the conversation that guided humanity toward a better future, then it was a responsibility he was willing to take on. As he sat in his office later that day, preparing for his first formal meeting with government officials, Musk couldn't shake the sense that this was a turning point. He had no idea where it would lead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he was moving in the right direction. Elon Musk knew that the decision he had just made was monumental. Stepping into the political sphere, collaborating with the White House to tackle some of the world's most pressing issues, was a leap he hadn't expected to take. But now that he had committed, there was no turning back. The meeting was set for the following week. Musk arrived in Washington, D.C., for what would be one of the most important discussions of his career. The White House had arranged for him to meet with high-ranking officials from multiple departments, as well as other key players in the world of climate change, energy, and technology. It was an unprecedented gathering, an assembly of minds from all corners of the American political landscape, each focused on the future of the planet. Musk arrived at the White House early in the morning, his mind racing. His usual self-assured demeanor was tempered by the weight of the situation. He had always prided himself on thinking outside the box, but this was different. The decisions made here would affect billions of lives, shaping the world for generations to come. There was no room for mistakes. As Musk walked through the hallowed halls of the White House, he couldn't help but feel the history of the place. Every step he took echoed with the legacies of past leaders, from Abraham Lincoln to Franklin D. Roosevelt to John F. Kennedy. It was impossible not to feel the gravity of it all. He was no longer just an entrepreneur and engineer, he was about to become part of something far bigger than himself. Inside the Oval Office, President Martin Collins was waiting for him, along with a team of advisors. Musk shook hands with the president, who greeted him warmly. "Elon, it's great to finally meet you in person. I appreciate you taking the time to discuss this with us," Collins said, his tone genuine but clearly focused. "Thank you for having me, Mr. President," Musk replied, his voice calm but thoughtful. "I believe in what you're trying to accomplish here. I think we have a real opportunity to make a difference." The president nodded. "That's what we're hoping for. You've accomplished so much in the private sector, Elon. You're known for thinking boldly, for taking risks, and for doing things that others wouldn't even consider. That's exactly what we need in this room." Musk took a seat, his eyes scanning the room. Around him sat a mix of scientists, policy experts, and strategists, people who had spent their careers thinking about the intersection of politics and technology. They all looked at Musk with a mix of curiosity and anticipation, eager to hear his thoughts on how to address the growing climate crisis, how to push for sustainable energy solutions, and how to integrate space exploration into long-term environmental strategies. The task ahead of us is daunting, President Collins continued. The science is clear, climate change is happening, and it's accelerating. We need to drastically reduce emissions, develop renewable energy sources, and ensure that the future we're building is one where future generations can thrive. We also need to expand our capabilities in space, to ensure that humanity has a future beyond Earth. Musk nodded, his mind already racing with ideas. He had been thinking about this for years, how his work at Tesla, SpaceX, and Neuralink could be part of a larger, integrated effort to save the planet and prepare humanity for the future. But hearing the president articulate the scope of the challenge made it even clearer to him how much was at stake. I think the answer lies in a multi-pronged approach, Musk began, his voice steady but passionate. We need to continue pushing forward on electric vehicles and renewable energy, but we also need to rethink how we use resources on Earth. Tesla has made significant strides with solar energy and battery storage, but there's still so much more to be done. We also need to make a concerted effort to accelerate the adoption of sustainable technologies at a global scale. He paused for a moment, glancing at the faces around the room. But we can't ignore space, either. Space exploration and the development of a self-sustaining colony on Mars will provide humanity with a long-term backup. If we put all our eggs in one basket, we risk losing everything. We need to expand our reach beyond Earth. The room fell silent as everyone considered Musk's words. The idea of a multi-pronged approach wasn't new, but Musk's emphasis on the integration of space exploration with climate change mitigation was a novel concept. His vision wasn't just about solving the problems of today, it was about creating a roadmap for humanity's survival in the long run. Finally, one of the senior advisors spoke up. You're suggesting that we not only need to solve the problems of climate change but also prepare for the worst-case scenario. That's a bold vision, Elon. But how do we get there? How do we turn these ideas into reality on a national scale? Musk leaned forward. We start by removing the barriers to innovation. The government has a huge role to play in incentivizing clean energy and space exploration. There needs to be an ecosystem where private companies can thrive, but where regulations are aligned with the long-term goals of sustainability. If we work together, we can build that future. President Collins nodded thoughtfully. We've been thinking along similar lines. But we need someone like you, someone who's willing to take the leap and push the boundaries. Can we count on you to help guide this effort? Musk hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of the responsibility. He had always been one to jump headfirst into challenges, but this was different. This was a commitment that would affect the entire world. And yet, despite the gravity of it, Musk knew that this was the moment he had been waiting for. This was the chance to make a lasting impact, not just on the future of space or energy, but on the future of humanity itself. I'm in, Musk said, his voice unwavering. Let's do this. The decision was made. Musk agreed to collaborate with the White House, offering his expertise and resources to tackle the climate crisis, develop sustainable technologies, and push the boundaries of space exploration. It wouldn't be easy. There were political hurdles, corporate interests, and global challenges to overcome. But Musk was no stranger to overcoming obstacles. As he left the Oval Office that day, Musk felt a sense of clarity and purpose that he hadn't experienced in a long time. He was no longer just a businessman or a tech entrepreneur, he was a leader in the fight for humanity's future. The days following Elon Musk's commitment to the White House were a whirlwind of meetings, strategy sessions, and proposals. He knew that if he was going to make any real change, he couldn't rely solely on his companies. This had to be a coordinated effort, a partnership between the private sector, the government, and a variety of industries all working toward a common goal. The idea of bringing together leaders from different sectors filled Musk with a renewed sense of urgency. Time was not on their side. The climate crisis was worsening, and the window to act was closing faster than anyone could have anticipated. Musk spent the next several days in meetings with government officials, scientists, environmentalists, and industry leaders. The first few discussions were primarily focused on the immediate goals: reducing emissions, transitioning to renewable energy sources, and implementing nationwide initiatives that would tackle the environmental challenges head-on. Musk was adamant that the solutions had to be scalable. Anything less would be ineffective. But it was during one of these early meetings that a breakthrough idea emerged, an idea that would change the landscape of energy in the United States forever. "Look, the problem is that people are still hesitant to fully embrace clean energy," Musk said, sitting at the head of a large conference table surrounded by key government and industry leaders. "We need a solution that's more than just an alternative, it needs to be the obvious choice. People won't change unless it's easier and cheaper than the status quo." A senior energy official from the Department of Energy, David Alvarez, looked at Musk with skepticism. "You're talking about a massive overhaul of the nation's energy infrastructure. We've tried things like this before, and there are always barriers, political, financial, and technological. It's not as simple as you make it sound." Musk leaned in, his eyes sharp. "It's not about simplicity, it's about making it inevitable. We can revolutionize how energy is stored and distributed. Tesla's battery technology is already leading the way. We need to take it further, faster. If we combine that with nationwide solar initiatives and the right infrastructure, we can create a grid that is both reliable and renewable." The room went silent for a moment, as people digested Musk's words. He had been talking about a massive, countrywide transition to solar and battery-powered energy, but now he was presenting a solution that combined his Tesla technology with government-backed initiatives. The potential was staggering. "We're talking about building a completely renewable grid," Musk continued. "Imagine a country where solar energy isn't just an option, it's the backbone of everything. Where every home, every business, and every government building runs on clean energy. We could create a self-sustaining energy ecosystem powered by renewables. We can do it." A younger policy advisor, Sarah Knight, spoke up. "But how do we make that happen on the scale you're talking about? The infrastructure changes alone would be monumental. And then there's the cost, the initial investment would be astronomical." Musk didn't hesitate. "The initial investment is high, but the long-term savings would be massive. Once we scale up production of solar panels and batteries, the costs will come down. And we can implement incentives to encourage private investment. What we need is a long-term commitment from the government to create the framework for this. If we can reduce dependence on fossil fuels and create a renewable grid, it'll be a game-changer for the economy." The conversation quickly shifted toward specifics. Musk outlined a plan to build a series of massive solar farms across the country, powered by Tesla's solar roof technology and supported by the latest advancements in battery storage. He proposed a partnership between the federal government and private companies to fund the transition, offering tax incentives, grants, and research funding to support the effort. The benefits were clear: job creation, long-term savings, energy independence, and a cleaner environment. By the end of the meeting, Musk had convinced everyone in the room that the plan was viable. It wasn't just a bold idea, it was a necessary one. The future of the nation depended on it. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, policy debates, and negotiations. The White House worked to secure bipartisan support for the initiative, and Musk worked closely with Tesla's engineers to refine the technology that would power this new grid. Meanwhile, SpaceX began working on an ambitious new project, using satellite technology to help monitor and optimize energy production from the solar farms. The integration of space technology with energy infrastructure was something Musk had been thinking about for years, and now it was becoming a reality. By the time the first major announcement came, the plan was ready. Musk stood before a crowd of government officials, industry leaders, and journalists at a press conference held on the White House lawn. The stakes were higher than ever, and the pressure was on. But Musk was resolute. This was his chance to make history. Today marks the beginning of a new chapter in America's energy future, Musk said, his voice steady but passionate. We are launching a nationwide effort to create a fully renewable energy grid, one that will be powered by solar, stored in Tesla batteries, and managed through cutting-edge technology. This is the future we've been working toward, and today we begin making that future a reality. The crowd erupted in applause, but Musk knew that this was only the first step. There would be challenges ahead. Resistance from fossil fuel industries, political opposition, and the massive scale of the project were all obstacles that would need to be overcome. But Musk had faced challenges before, and he wasn't afraid of a fight. In the weeks that followed, the initiative gained momentum. Tesla's solar products began to roll out across the country, and the first solar farms were built in key locations. The federal government committed to investing billions of dollars in the project, and private sector companies began to follow suit, investing in clean energy technologies. Musk's vision was becoming a reality, but it was clear that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The political opposition was fierce, and there were those who questioned whether the transition to a fully renewable energy grid was even possible. But Musk knew one thing: he couldn't afford to stop now. The world was watching, and the future was in their hands. The next phase of the plan would be even more ambitious, turning the entire country into a beacon of renewable energy, a model for the world to follow. And as Musk looked ahead, he couldn't help but feel the weight of history on his shoulders. He wasn't just building a new energy grid, he was building the future. As Elon Musk's ambitious plan to revolutionize America's energy infrastructure took shape, the road ahead grew increasingly fraught with opposition. While many embraced the vision of a renewable energy future, there were plenty of detractors, both in the political and corporate realms, who saw the shift as a threat to their own interests. The fossil fuel industry, in particular, was not going to let Musk's vision become a reality without a fight. Lobbyists from major oil and gas companies descended on Washington, pushing back against the federal government's new focus on clean energy. They argued that the economic costs of transitioning to renewable energy were too high, that the technology wasn't ready, and that the loss of jobs in the traditional energy sectors would have devastating effects on local economies. Musk, however, was undeterred. He had weathered storms before, whether they were the risks of SpaceX's early launches or the battles with automakers over electric vehicles. But this was different. This was a national initiative, and the stakes were much higher. One evening, Musk sat in his office at Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, California, reviewing a series of emails from the White House. The backlash was intensifying. It seemed like every day, another politician or pundit was speaking out against the new energy plan, dismissing it as unrealistic, expensive, or even dangerous. The media coverage was mixed at best, with critics saying the shift would leave Americans struggling with higher energy bills, while supporters argued it was the only path forward. Musk had always prided himself on taking on the impossible, but this battle felt different. The opponents weren't just faceless corporations, they were powerful, entrenched players with massive resources and influence. He needed a new strategy. He picked up his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in years. Sarah Knight, the young policy advisor from the White House, answered after a few rings. "Hello, Elon," she said, her voice tired but hopeful. "What's going on?" "I think it's time for us to take this fight to the people," Musk said without preamble. "We've been playing defense long enough. We need to go on offense, and I think the public is ready for it." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "You're suggesting a public campaign?" "Exactly," Musk replied. "We need to show the American people why this is necessary, why the old system is broken and why this is the only way forward. We have to shift the narrative. If we can get enough public support, it will put pressure on the politicians to do the right thing." There was a pause before Sarah spoke again. "You're right. We need to take the message directly to the people. But how do we do that?" Musk smiled. "Leave that to me." Over the next few weeks, Musk embarked on a media blitz the likes of which the country had never seen. He appeared on popular talk shows, gave interviews with major news outlets, and even took to social media with a series of bold, provocative statements designed to challenge the status quo. But he didn't stop there. Musk launched a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign aimed at educating the public about the benefits of renewable energy and debunking the myths being spread by the opposition. The ads featured real people, workers in coal towns, farmers in the Midwest, and business owners in major cities, all talking about how the shift to solar and battery-powered energy would not only help the environment but also create jobs, lower energy costs, and make the country more energy independent. At the same time, Musk pushed for new legislation that would provide additional incentives for solar adoption and support renewable energy projects in underserved areas. He worked closely with the White House to fine-tune the details, knowing that political will was crucial to the success of the entire plan. He made it clear that this wasn't just about making a profit, it was about changing the course of history. Despite the public pushback, the tide began to turn. In several key battleground states, support for renewable energy started to grow as people saw the tangible benefits of the new policies. Job growth in the clean energy sector surged, and new projects began popping up in areas that had once been dominated by fossil fuel industries. The ads Musk had sponsored were working, they were educating the public, one person at a time. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. The opposition continued to rally, and the media attacks became sharper and more personal. Musk's detractors accused him of being a tech billionaire with no regard for the working class. They painted him as an elitist who was forcing his radical agenda on ordinary Americans. The attacks grew fiercer as Musk's influence in Washington grew, and soon he found himself embroiled in a political war of words. One particularly scathing attack came from Senator Carl Peterson, a longtime opponent of clean energy initiatives. Peterson held a press conference in which he accused Musk of trying to destroy the American way of life by pushing for a renewable energy transition that would, according to him, lead to widespread job losses and skyrocketing energy prices. The idea that a billionaire like Elon Musk can simply dictate our energy future is an affront to every working American, Peterson declared. He may have the luxury of sitting in his Silicon Valley mansion, but the rest of us are concerned about how we're going to pay our bills if this plan goes through. Musk didn't back down. He took to Twitter, as he so often did, and responded with a blunt tweet: "The future of energy isn't about protecting old industries. It's about creating a better future for all." #CleanEnergyForAll, the tweet went viral, garnering both support and criticism in equal measure. But Musk's message was clear: this was a fight for the future of the country, and he wasn't going to let political rhetoric stop him from achieving his vision. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but then again, nothing worthwhile ever was. As the months went by, the battle continued to rage. But slowly, public sentiment began to shift in Musk's favor. The stories of job creation, lower energy bills, and cleaner air resonated with people. Even in traditionally conservative regions, the benefits of clean energy began to outweigh the fear of change. Musk, now fully entrenched in the political fight, continued to push forward. He knew the real work was just beginning. The opposition wasn't going to give up easily, and there were still plenty of hurdles to clear. But as long as the public remained on his side, he knew they had a chance to succeed. And in the end, that was what mattered most. The fight for the future was not just about technology or policy. It was about making sure the next generation had a world worth inheriting. Months passed, and the battle for renewable energy continued to unfold with intensity. Despite the backlash from the fossil fuel industry and the political opposition, Elon Musk's message had struck a chord with many Americans. But the road to success was far from guaranteed. As with any significant political and technological revolution, there were unexpected turns, moments of doubt, and shifting alliances that would define the outcome. Just when it seemed like the weight of resistance might overcome the momentum for change, Musk found an unlikely ally, Senator Maria Torres. A seasoned politician from Texas, Torres had been known for her strong ties to the oil and gas industry. In fact, her state was one of the largest producers of fossil fuels in the country, and she had long been a staunch opponent of clean energy policies. But something changed in Torres as the renewable energy push continued to gain ground. The persistent, growing support for solar power and clean energy projects in her home state began to change the conversation. It wasn't just the people, it was the businesses, the local governments, and even her own constituents who were calling for change. The Texas economy, historically reliant on oil, had started to see a boom in clean energy projects, including solar farms, wind turbines, and battery storage systems. In fact, Texas had become a leader in wind energy production, and many of her colleagues began to see that the future was in renewables. Torres was initially hesitant to take sides. But after a meeting with Elon Musk, where he outlined his vision and the potential for economic growth in her state, her perspective began to shift. The meeting took place in Washington, D.C., in a nondescript conference room deep inside the Senate office building. Musk arrived early, as he always did, and was seated when Torres entered, her face a mask of professionalism. She had a reputation for being tough, unyielding, and focused solely on the bottom line. She wasn't about to let Musk off easy. "Mr. Musk, I'm sure you know why we're here," she said, taking a seat across from him. Musk nodded, his expression calm but earnest. "I'm here because I think we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to transform the energy industry, and I believe Texas can be at the center of that transformation." Torres raised an eyebrow. "And what do you want from me? I'm not just going to roll over for you. This is Texas, after all." "I know that," Musk said, leaning forward. "But I'm not asking you to roll over. I'm asking you to consider the future. Right now, Texas is one of the largest producers of fossil fuels in the world, but there's a huge opportunity to lead in renewable energy too. Think about the job growth. Think about the communities that are suffering from the boom and bust cycles of oil. Renewable energy provides stability, and it's cleaner. It's the future." Torres folded her arms, unconvinced. "And you think a shift to solar and wind is going to replace all those jobs in the oil and gas sector?" Musk nodded. "Not all of them, but a lot. We're talking about tens of thousands of new jobs in renewable energy production, manufacturing, installation, and maintenance. Not to mention the economic growth that comes with it. The infrastructure needed for renewable energy projects is huge, and Texas is positioned to lead the way." Torres considered his words. She had seen the decline of the oil industry firsthand, and she knew the impact it had on her constituents. But she also understood the risks involved in making such a dramatic shift. It wasn't just about the jobs, it was about the future of Texas's economy, and she didn't want to make any decisions that could jeopardize that. "I've seen the numbers," she said, looking over some reports Musk had sent her. "Renewable energy is growing, but it's still a fraction of what oil and gas bring in. And you're talking about massive changes. It's not that easy." Musk smiled, sensing an opening. "I know it's not easy. But change never is. The oil and gas industry has had its time, and it's served Texas well for decades. But it's time for the next generation to take over. And we can make this transition smoother than people think. With the right policies, incentives, and leadership, we can create a Texas that's not only a leader in oil but also in solar, wind, and battery technology." Torres sat back, the weight of the decision beginning to settle on her shoulders. Musk had always been a visionary, but there was something in his words that resonated with her. She had spent her entire career fighting for the people of Texas, ensuring they had the jobs, stability, and opportunities they deserved. If Musk was right, this could be the next step in ensuring Texas's prosperity for decades to come. Finally, after a long silence, Torres spoke. "All right, Musk. I'm not making any promises, but I'm willing to listen. I'll work with you. Let's see what we can do together." It wasn't a full endorsement, but it was a start. For Musk, it was a breakthrough. He knew that having a prominent Texas senator on his side would be a game-changer, especially when it came to convincing other lawmakers from oil-producing states to support the renewable energy push. The following weeks were a whirlwind of meetings between Musk, Senator Torres, and key members of both the Texas state government and the White House. With Torres on board, Musk was able to present a case to lawmakers that focused not just on the environmental benefits of clean energy but on the economic opportunities for Texas and the broader country. As the political discourse shifted, Musk's initiative began to gain momentum once again. The push for a nationwide transition to clean energy had a new advocate in Torres, and her influence in the Senate was undeniable. The conversation around renewable energy shifted from one of skepticism to one of hope, a hope that the future could be brighter, more sustainable, and more prosperous for all Americans. Despite the progress, there were still those who fought against the changes, convinced that the old ways were better. But with the renewed support of unlikely allies like Senator Maria Torres, Musk was confident that the vision of a sustainable future could become a reality. The energy revolution was gaining steam, and soon, it would be impossible to stop. With Senator Maria Torres on board, Elon Musk's push for a renewable energy revolution began to gain serious momentum. The political landscape was shifting, albeit slowly, and Musk knew that if he was going to succeed, he would need to navigate the complex web of congressional politics with precision. It wasn't just about convincing a handful of lawmakers, it was about building a coalition that could support his vision for the future, even in the face of stiff opposition. In the following weeks, Musk and Torres worked tirelessly behind the scenes, organizing meetings with key members of Congress, business leaders, and environmental advocates. They traveled across the country, speaking at town halls, visiting energy hubs, and meeting with community leaders to emphasize the economic and environmental benefits of renewable energy. But while the push for change was gaining ground in the public sphere, the real test was in Congress. The fossil fuel industry still had deep roots in Washington, with many senators and representatives relying on donations and lobbying efforts from powerful oil and gas companies. Musk knew that winning over Congress would require more than just a compelling argument, it would require strategy, persuasion, and, above all, patience. One crisp fall morning, Musk sat in his office at Tesla headquarters, staring at a series of reports detailing the latest round of lobbying efforts by the oil and gas industry. The numbers were sobering. Fossil fuel companies had spent billions of dollars on lobbying campaigns, with the goal of quashing the renewable energy push. The advertisements, billboards, and political ads that flooded the airwaves were all designed to sow doubt about the feasibility of Musk's vision. But Musk wasn't discouraged. He'd faced similar challenges before. SpaceX, after all, had survived early setbacks, skepticism, and near failure. He understood that big changes required resilience, and he wasn't about to back down now. The next step was clear, a coordinated push in Congress. With Torres as his ally, Musk set up a series of meetings with key committee members, focusing on the committees that held the power to pass energy-related legislation. These meetings were crucial. This was where the real battles for policy were fought. The first meeting took place in a small, windowless conference room on Capitol Hill. Musk and Torres sat across from Senator Mark Jefferson, a conservative lawmaker from Wyoming who had long been a vocal opponent of renewable energy initiatives. Jefferson was known for his strong ties to the coal industry and had received significant campaign contributions from mining companies. He had built his political career on defending the status quo. As the meeting began, Jefferson wasted no time in challenging Musk's vision. "You've got some nerve, Musk," he said, leaning back in his chair. "You're telling me that a multi-billion-dollar industry built on fossil fuels can be replaced by solar panels and wind turbines? What are you going to do about all the coal miners and their families? What about the local economies that rely on oil and gas?" Musk was prepared. He had done his homework and was ready with facts, statistics, and examples of how renewable energy could provide new jobs and create economic opportunities in places that had traditionally relied on fossil fuels. Senator Jefferson, I understand the concerns about job loss, and I don't take that lightly, Musk replied. But the truth is that renewable energy can create more jobs than it destroys. We're already seeing it in places like Texas, where wind and solar energy have become major industries. Coal miners and oil workers can be retrained and employed in these new sectors. And the benefits aren't just environmental, they're economic. We're talking about energy independence and lower energy costs for American families. Jefferson wasn't convinced, but Musk could see that his arguments were making a dent. The lawmaker's posture softened slightly, and he leaned forward, his skepticism still palpable. I'm not saying I'm sold on your ideas, Musk, but I'll give you this, you're persistent. But getting Congress to buy in on this won't be easy, Jefferson said, narrowing his eyes. You've got the environmentalists behind you, but you're going to need a lot more than that to turn the tide here. Musk nodded. I understand. But we're not just talking about environmentalists. We're talking about the American people, the future of the country. And I believe the future is in clean, renewable energy. That's the direction we're headed in, whether we like it or not. As the weeks passed, Musk and Torres continued to press their case. They met with other lawmakers, some more receptive than others, but the core of their strategy remained the same: focus on the economic opportunities and the jobs that renewable energy could create. The key was framing the debate not as an environmental issue, but as an economic one. It wasn't just about saving the planet, it was about building a sustainable future for American workers, families, and businesses. And as the numbers for job growth in the clean energy sector began to roll in, it became harder for even the most skeptical lawmakers to ignore the reality of the situation. In one pivotal moment, Senator Carlos Martinez, a key member of the Senate Energy Committee, made a public statement in support of Musk's vision. I've seen the numbers, Martinez said during a televised interview. I've seen the jobs being created in my own state. It's time we start looking ahead, not behind. Renewable energy is the future of American energy, and I'm proud to support it. Martinez's endorsement was a breakthrough. As a member of the Energy Committee, his support gave Musk's campaign a crucial boost. It was proof that renewable energy was no longer a fringe issue, it was becoming a mainstream, bipartisan cause. With each passing day, the momentum for change continued to build. The once divisive issue of renewable energy was slowly gaining traction across the political spectrum. Musk had his work cut out for him, but with allies like Senator Torres and new supporters like Martinez, he could sense that victory was within reach. The fight wasn't over yet. There were still obstacles to overcome, and there would undoubtedly be more setbacks along the way. But one thing was clear, the tide was turning. The future of American energy was being reshaped, and Musk was at the forefront of that revolution. Just as the renewable energy movement was gaining critical mass in Congress, an unexpected crisis struck that threatened to derail everything. It came not from an external enemy, but from within the movement itself, a technological glitch so severe it threatened the credibility of Musk's entire initiative. It all started with the launch of a new solar energy initiative that Tesla had been quietly working on for months, a revolutionary solar panel designed to provide clean, affordable energy for entire neighborhoods. The project, dubbed Solar City 2.0, was ambitious, an effort to expand beyond individual homes and power entire communities with solar arrays linked to Tesla's growing battery storage technology. This was supposed to be a game-changer, one that could set the stage for widespread adoption of renewable energy across the country. However, shortly after the first batch of installations went live, a catastrophic failure occurred. Some of the solar panels began malfunctioning at a large scale. In a few isolated but highly publicized cases, entire neighborhoods lost power due to faulty wiring in the system, causing Tesla's newly installed solar batteries to short-circuit. News outlets picked up the story within hours, and soon, every major media outlet was reporting on the failure. The backlash was immediate. Tesla's big solar push faces major setback, read one headline. Solar City 2.0 failures sparked concerns over Elon Musk's green revolution, blared another. The public outcry was fierce. Supporters of renewable energy began to question Musk's bold vision. Was he biting off more than he could chew? Had he overpromised and underdelivered on his green energy initiative? The backlash reverberated all the way to Capitol Hill, where some of the lawmakers' support that had been building in Musk's favor began to falter. Senator Jefferson, who had shown a glimmer of support for renewable energy, came out with a scathing public statement. "This is exactly why we need to be careful with these grand plans. Solar power is untested on a large scale, and now we see the consequences. If we're going to change the energy landscape, we need to be certain that these systems will work. It's not just about ambition, it's about reliability." The critics were rightfully concerned. How could Musk, who had staked so much of his personal and professional reputation on the promise of renewable energy, recover from such a blow? The media frenzy turned toxic, and Musk was forced to confront his biggest challenge yet, not just a technical failure, but a crisis of faith. Elon Musk sat in his office late one night, the glow of his desk lamp casting long shadows across the room. His mind raced as he read through the reports from his engineers. It was a clear issue. A miscalculation in the solar panel's wiring design had led to the short-circuiting of the batteries, leaving customers in the dark. The good news was that the problem could be fixed with a firmware update and a replacement of the faulty components, but the bad news was that this was happening at the worst possible time. Musk knew that the stakes were higher than ever. With Congress watching, with his supporters eager to see tangible results, and with the renewable energy industry looking to him as a trailblazer, this crisis could bring everything crashing down. He could feel the pressure mounting. He had to make the right move, and fast. The next day, Musk called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. As they gathered around the conference table, he spoke with a calm but determined voice. "We're going to fix this," Musk said, his eyes scanning the room. "This is a setback, yes, but it's not the end. We've been through tough times before. Remember SpaceX? We almost went bankrupt after the first few failed launches. But we didn't quit then, and we're not quitting now." He paused for a moment, allowing his words to settle. "I want a full investigation into what happened, and I want a plan to fix the problem within 48 hours. We're going to take full responsibility for this and do whatever it takes to make it right. That's how we rebuild trust." The next few days were a blur of activity. Tesla engineers worked around the clock to isolate the fault and roll out a solution. In the meantime, Musk personally reached out to key stakeholders, including the lawmakers who had been on his side. He knew the political game was just as important as the technical fixes. The press was relentless, and the situation was becoming a public relations nightmare. In one of his calls to Senator Maria Torres, Musk explained the situation in detail, knowing full well that her support was crucial. "I'm not going to sugarcoat it, Maria. We've hit a serious bump in the road, but we're fixing it," Musk said. "I need your support, and I need you to help me get the word out that we're handling this the right way. We can't let this derail everything we've been working for." Torres's voice was steady, though there was a hint of concern. "I understand, Elon. This is a setback, but I've seen you pull through before. I'll make sure the people on the Hill know that you're on top of this. But you need to show them the results, fast." Musk knew she was right. This was his moment of truth. His entire renewable energy campaign hinged on how he handled the next few days. He had to show Congress, the public, and his supporters that even when faced with failure, he would rise to the occasion. By the end of the week, Tesla had solved the problem. The faulty panels were replaced, and a new software update was sent out to all affected systems. The company issued a public apology, acknowledging the mistakes and detailing the steps they had taken to ensure it wouldn't happen again. In his public statement, Musk didn't shy away from the crisis. Instead, he embraced it. "We hit a bump in the road. But we're moving forward, and we're learning from it. The journey to a sustainable future won't be without its challenges. But we will continue to innovate, continue to improve, and continue to fight for a cleaner, greener planet. That's our commitment to you. The apology, along with the swift resolution of the issue, began to win back some of the public's trust. It wasn't enough to erase the damage completely, but it was a start. More importantly, Musk's actions sent a clear message to Congress: he was willing to own his mistakes and fix them, even when the stakes were higher than ever. As the crisis subsided, the focus shifted back to the renewable energy movement. The support from lawmakers like Senator Torres remained strong, and the public's faith in the potential of clean energy was slowly being restored. The fight was far from over, but Musk had weathered the storm, and he knew that the next battle would be even bigger. The crisis had passed, but the real battle was just beginning. Musk had weathered the storm of the Solar City 2.0 setback, but now, the ultimate test awaited him in Congress. The fate of the renewable energy movement rested on whether or not he could secure enough votes to pass the sweeping energy reforms he had worked so hard to build. Time was running out, and every second counted. In the weeks that followed the public apology, Musk intensified his efforts to gather support. His relationship with Senator Maria Torres had become increasingly vital, as she was the one championing his cause behind closed doors. With her influence in the Senate growing, Musk knew that if they could secure her backing on the final energy bill, they would have a better shot at passing it, regardless of the opposition. Musk's mind raced as he sat in a conference room in Washington, D.C., preparing for the final hearing before the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. The room was filled with powerful figures, influential senators, lobbyists, energy industry experts, and the media. The stakes couldn't have been higher. It was do-or-die time. Musk had spent years building up to this moment. Everything from the massive investments in Tesla's solar technology to the groundbreaking developments at SpaceX, his entire vision for the future of clean energy, had led to this very day. He couldn't afford to fail, not now, not when so much was at stake. Senator Jefferson was waiting for him on the other side of the hearing room. The Wyoming senator had been one of Musk's staunchest critics. A longtime advocate of the fossil fuel industry, Jefferson had raised concerns about Musk's plans for renewable energy, especially after the Solar City debacle. Musk had always known Jefferson would be tough to convince, but today, things had shifted. They had to. As Musk walked toward the witness table, he felt the weight of the room's gaze upon him. The reporters, the lobbyists, and the powerful figures all seemed to wait with bated breath to see if Musk could make his case. "Mr. Musk," Jefferson's voice boomed across the room, "you've managed to garner a great deal of attention with your promises of a renewable energy revolution. But after the recent failures with Solar City 2.0, why should we believe that your plans are viable?" Musk stood tall, unwavering. The failures of Solar City were behind him, and it was time to refocus the conversation on the future. "Senator Jefferson, I've always believed that innovation comes with risks," Musk began. "When we first launched Tesla, people said electric cars would never work. And now, we're leading the world in electric vehicle sales. The same can be said for solar power. Yes, we hit a setback, but we learned from it, and we fixed it. Now, we have a solution that's better than ever." Musk paused, letting his words settle in the room. The renewable energy revolution isn't about avoiding failure, it's about learning from it and pushing forward. We have the technology, we have the workforce, and we have the commitment to make this happen. It's time to secure America's energy future, and I believe renewable energy is the key. There was a moment of silence. Jefferson raised an eyebrow, clearly considering Musk's words. He had always been skeptical, but there was something about Musk's conviction that made him pause. For the first time, Jefferson could see the possibility of a new future, one where renewable energy wasn't a pipe dream, but a tangible solution. As the hearing continued, Musk was bombarded with questions from both sides of the aisle. Some senators pushed for more guarantees regarding job creation in rural areas, while others questioned the potential economic impacts of transitioning away from fossil fuels. Musk knew these concerns were valid, but he was ready. "Senator, I understand the concerns," Musk replied to one lawmaker. "That's why our plan doesn't just focus on solar panels and wind turbines. We're talking about a complete overhaul of our energy infrastructure, one that provides well-paying jobs in communities that have been left behind by the traditional energy industry. We're going to bring real, long-term economic growth to these areas, and we're doing it by investing in clean energy technologies that will power America for decades to come." Musk could feel the room starting to shift. His words resonated with some senators, and even Jefferson seemed to be reconsidering his opposition. But there were still opponents to convince, powerful lobbyists from the oil and gas industries who weren't ready to let go of their grip on Washington. Later that evening, Musk and Senator Torres met privately to strategize. They sat across from each other in a small office near the Capitol, the weight of the day's events hanging heavy between them. "It's going to be close," Torres said, her voice calm but full of concern. "We've made some progress today, but we need to make sure that we have the votes. We can't afford any more surprises." Musk nodded. "I agree. We've come too far to lose now. But I can feel it, Maria. We're on the edge of something huge here. If we can pull this off, it will change everything." Torres leaned forward, her eyes locked on Musk's. "You've built something incredible with Tesla and SpaceX. But this is bigger than any company. This is about changing the future of the country. We need to get everyone on board, and we need to do it now." As the vote loomed closer, the tension in Washington grew. Lobbyists worked overtime to try to sway undecided senators, and the media continued to dissect every word spoken in the hearings. Musk knew that Congress had the power to make or break his vision. If they voted in favor of the bill, it would be a monumental step forward in the fight for renewable energy. But if they voted against it, it would be a crushing defeat that could set the movement back years. The next morning, as the final vote approached, Musk stood before a microphone in the Senate lobby. He addressed the press, speaking not just to them but to the American people. "This is a critical moment in our history," Musk said, his voice steady and clear. "We stand at the crossroads of the future. We have the opportunity to invest in clean, renewable energy that will power America for generations to come. The choice is ours. I urge Congress to vote for a cleaner, brighter future." The Senate was about to vote. The moment of truth had arrived. Musk could feel the weight of history bearing down on him. This vote would either pave the way for a new era of clean energy or leave the country stuck in the past. As the clerk called the roll, every senator's name seemed to echo in Musk's mind. Would it be a victory for the future? Or would the fossil fuel industry continue to dominate America's energy policy? The atmosphere in the Senate chamber was thick with anticipation. It had been a long, hard journey, filled with setbacks, victories, doubts, and breakthroughs. Now, everything came down to this moment, the final vote on the Renewable Energy Reform Act. Would the United States take the bold step toward a future powered by clean, sustainable energy? Or would the entrenched interests of the fossil fuel industry win out, condemning the country to rely on outdated, polluting technologies for decades to come? Elon Musk stood in the back of the Senate chamber, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. His entire life had led him to this point. The clean energy revolution he had envisioned for so long was within reach, but the outcome was far from certain. Behind him, Senator Maria Torres was speaking with some of the undecided senators, trying to convince them one last time of the importance of this vote. Musk knew the pressure was immense for everyone involved, but today was the day that could change everything. It had been weeks since that intense hearing, and the work didn't stop there. Torres and Musk's team had worked tirelessly behind the scenes, reaching out to both Democrats and Republicans to shore up support. They had even secured the backing of a few key Republican senators, a feat that seemed almost impossible given the partisan divide. Musk's unwavering belief in the future of renewable energy and his relentless drive to make the world a better place had convinced enough senators to give the bill a chance. The vote was called, and one by one, each senator's name was read aloud. Musk stood with bated breath as the roll call proceeded, his heart racing. He watched as the tally grew, slowly but surely. Yes, 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 the votes in favor of the bill were beginning to outnumber the noes. Each vote for renewable energy felt like a small victory, a step closer to reshaping the country's energy future. And then it happened. The final vote, Senator Jefferson, the staunchest opponent of the bill, stepped forward to cast his ballot. For a moment, it seemed as if time had stopped. Would he cast a vote against the future? Or would he surprise everyone and vote for a clean energy revolution? Jefferson looked down at his ballot. The weight of the moment hung heavy in the air. His career had been built on his allegiance to the fossil fuel industry, yet here he was, standing on the brink of something greater. Musk and Torres had worked tirelessly to make him see the potential of the renewable energy movement, not just for the environment, but for the future of the economy and American jobs. With a heavy sigh, Jefferson placed his ballot in the box, and the room held its collective breath. Then, slowly, he raised his head and nodded toward the clerk. Yes, he said, his voice loud and clear. The room erupted into applause. Musk's heart skipped a beat. It was official, the vote had passed. The Renewable Energy Reform Act was one step closer to becoming law. It was a victory for the planet, for the future, and for those who believed in the power of innovation to change the world. As the applause continued, Musk stood there for a moment, stunned. He had done it. It wasn't just about the passage of a single bill, it was about a vision, a dream he had fought for so long to bring to life. But this was only the beginning. Musk knew that securing the passage of the bill was just the first step. There was still so much work to be done. The next phase would involve implementing the reforms, building the infrastructure for a clean energy economy, and making sure the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy was fair, equitable, and sustainable for all. Later that evening, Musk and Senator Torres walked out of the Senate chamber together, their faces weary but filled with a sense of accomplishment. The sun was setting behind them, casting a warm golden light over Washington, D.C. "You did it," Torres said, smiling. "I have to admit, I didn't think we could pull it off, but you've proven me wrong. You really changed minds today." Musk smiled back, though there was a glint of determination in his eyes. "This isn't just about me, Maria. It's about all of us. The world is ready for change. And we've just started to scratch the surface." He looked out over the Capitol building, his mind already racing ahead to the future. The next steps are going to be harder than ever. The real work begins now. The days following the vote were a whirlwind of celebrations and media attention. Headlines heralded the passage of the Renewable Energy Reform Act as a monumental achievement. The bill was seen as the most significant step the country had ever taken toward a clean, sustainable future. Musk was hailed as a visionary, and his commitment to a greener world was lauded by environmentalists, policymakers, and ordinary citizens alike. But while the headlines praised the victory, Musk knew that the hardest part of the journey was yet to come. The bill's passage was just the beginning. The implementation phase was going to require billions of dollars in investment, thousands of jobs, and coordination on an unprecedented scale. The transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy was a monumental task, one that would take decades to fully realize. But Musk was ready. He had always been ready for the impossible. Weeks later, Musk stood in front of a crowd of Tesla engineers, SpaceX astronauts, and renewable energy advocates at a special ceremony celebrating the passing of the bill. As he addressed the crowd, he reflected on the road they had traveled. The fight had been long and arduous, but together, they had made history. "We've done something incredible," Musk began, his voice filled with conviction. "But let's be clear, we've only just begun. This is not the end. It's the start of a new chapter in our journey toward a sustainable future. There will be challenges ahead, there will be failures, and there will be setbacks. But if we stay focused, if we stay true to our mission, "We will change the world." The crowd erupted into applause, and Musk felt a surge of pride. This was more than just a victory for Tesla or SpaceX, it was a victory for the planet, for future generations, and for the belief that a single individual could change the course of history. As time passed, Musk's vision for a sustainable future began to unfold. The Renewable Energy Reform Act was implemented, and over the next few decades, it became clear that the world had made a permanent shift toward clean energy. Solar power, wind energy, and battery storage became the backbone of America's energy grid, providing affordable, reliable, and sustainable power to millions of homes and businesses. Tesla's influence spread far beyond the electric vehicle market. The company became the world leader in renewable energy solutions, from solar panels to grid-scale battery storage systems. Musk's commitment to innovation and sustainability continued to drive his companies forward, making him one of the most influential figures in the history of energy and technology. Meanwhile, SpaceX successfully expanded humanity's presence beyond Earth, establishing colonies on Mars and beyond. Musk's ultimate dream of making life multiplanetary had taken its first steps, thanks to his unwavering belief in the power of innovation. The fight for a sustainable future was far from over, but the world had taken its first bold steps in the right direction. And for Musk, it was proof that even the most impossible dreams could become reality, if only you had the vision, the determination, and the courage to push forward. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. The future of clean energy is here, but the work isn't over. What are your thoughts on the Renewable Energy Reform Act? How do you think Musk's vision will continue to shape the world? Let us know below, and don't forget to hit the bell icon for more updates on this historic movement.